Today on Brian the Guys, we rank our favorite and worst X-Men heroes and villains. Let's freaking go. Hello, my Bry men, and welcome to another edition of Bry and the Mother Flippin' Guys. I'm your host, Brian Peters, and here tonight I have some guys who are big X-Men fans. Their fandom rivals my own. We got the new leader of the West Coast Avengers, Jure Finch,
Yo.
and we got the leader of the Krypton Report podcast, Jonathan Tyler Patrick.
Tonight I'll be known as Tyclops. Thank you.
Cyclops. I love it. On today's episode, we are giving our individual thoughts on who we think are the best and worst X-Men heroes and villains. This was not an easy task. We had to make a sacrifice because we're only given our top three for each category. But we did it. And I told these guys these can be who your favorites are or just who you think are the best and the worst. So that's basically like who your favorites are. But well, boys, the world wants to know our opinions. It wants us to debate. So we're going to get right into it because I'm pretty excited about this because I really am interested in what you guys are going to say. So the rules are simple. We're going to start with Finch because he's the best. Then we're going to go to Tyler. And then I'm going to end the round.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So we each have three worst and three best heroes and villains. We're going to start with villains. Okay. So I will allow one honorable mention or however many honorable mentions you have per top three if you had some difficulty making your list, because I sure did. But Finch will go first, and he has 1 minute to give us his number three worst villain and why they suck. Then Tyler has 1 minute to give his thoughts. I have 1 minute to give my thoughts. And then Tyler has 1 minute to give his number three worst, and so on and so forth. And we do that so everyone gives their worst villains. And then we'll move on to best villains, so on and so forth. Cool beans?
Got it.
All right. And if my calculations are correct.
Cool beans.
Cool beans, man. Oh, joy rules. No. And if my calculations are correct, that will make about 108 minutes of a podcast, 6 minutes for this opening ramble, and 6 minutes for closing. So nice 120-minute podcast, if I did my math. I put my best people on it.
Nice.
So let's get right to it, and let's waste no more time, or we'll have to call Bishop to fix it.
Hey. All right. So for my third worst, I reached in the bag for this one, and I got Mamo Max. Has elephant-like features. He debuted in X-Men 161 with the Brotherhood of Evil, led by Exodus in 2004. And basically, every time he shows up, he just gets defeated. He was easily incapacitated by Iceman. He was beaten by Juggernaut. He was captured and tested on, and eventually was consumed by a creature that they were working on, and by the people that designed and created X-24 or 23. So, Mamo Max.
Tyler, what do you think?
I have not heard of him. That must be why he sucks so much. So I'm gonna go with it. Like, okay.
I think I did see him, and he's pretty darn worthless. I mean, if you die pretty quick and like Iceman just freezes you, then you suck. But Iceman's Omega, so we love Iceman. So
yeah, like I said, I reached in the well for that, but yeah, I thought that's what we were going for. So
no, you gotta reach for the well because I don't think often we think about who's the worst. So I like it. All right, Tyler, what do you got, man?
Okay, so this one might be the one person on my worst list that might have controversy. We'll see. But I'm gonna go with Mojo because I just kind of find Mojo annoying and pointless. Like, as a foil for the X-Men, he was a character in the cartoon, and even when he appeared recently in X-Men 97, I just felt, I don't connect with him. I don't like, he just seems like one of those like one and done disposable type characters. but he keeps popping up, and I just think it's not really him that's the villain, it's all the stuff he surrounds himself with. So I think he's kind of worthless. It's kind of like Jabba the Hutt, where honestly Jabba could be defeated. We saw how quickly he died by Leia, but it's the people he surrounds himself with that makes him menacing. So, but yeah, I'm gonna go with Mojo.
Ooh, man. I I I ooh. Mojo I see where Mojo sucks. I do. I do. I definitely see what you're saying. But I see potential for Mojo in this day and age with TikTok and gaming and Twitch and all
I
that
can
stuff. So
I can
like
I can see that, but I'm trying not to think of like what I would do or what I could see the character becoming, but just what I've been given and what I've been exposed to.
that's fair.
Because I agree, because it's kind of like when I thought about the idea of the Matrix 4 and I thought about our culture today,
Mhm.
all the stuff you could dig into of how we're so plugged in now more than when the first Matrix came out, and they didn't really explore any of that.
No.
So I'm just
Okay,
trying to
based on what he is, I'm with you.
it's
Finch,
all good.
what do you think, buddy?
Well, spoiler alert, Mojo's on my worst list too. So, and honestly, I don't have many reasons. It's just annoying.
Yeah.
That's like the number one thing. So I tend to agree, but I definitely see he could have a lot of potential, and I see he was a product of the '90s, at least in the. That's where I was introduced to him from the show, but I know he's been in
He
the comic.
debuted in '85 in
Yeah,
Long
see,
Shot. So
so yeah, so I can't really disagree.
I don't think he could be a main villain and hold a whole movie, but or a TV, series or like a TV season. But I see what Mojo could be, but for what he is, Mojo sucks. I'm with you. I'm gonna give it to you, Tyler. All right. My number three. My honorable mention. No, this is tough for me, but my honorable mention is Black Tom Cassidy. I think he sucks. So he's a mutant who can generate and discharge blasts of force and heat through any wooden medium. He was a member of the Brotherhood of Mutants, but he's often like Juggernaut's sidekick or the guy that kind of like is telling Juggernaut what he should do. He totally sucks. So, but my true number three worst villain is Forearm.
man, dang it, Brian.
Forearm is literally just a dude with four arms. He 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 just sucks. All right, Finch, what do you think about that? Forearm and my arm will mention whatever.
I mean, you know, forearms kind of comes in handy sometimes, but as a X-Men villain, as an X-Men villain overall, yeah, he's not up there. So yeah, I mean, come on, forearms is such a popular thing. You got like what is it? The dude from
Goro.
Ben 10, Goro.
You
You
got
got
Mojo's assistant.
yeah,
Uh,
the chick that looks like Goro. Yeah, yeah. So you know,
what do you think, Tyler?
Oh, I refuse to say too much right now because he's on my list, Brian.
Hey, I knew ours would be pretty similar down the road, but all right. Well, my apologies.
No, it's good. I think like Finn said, forearms is cool, like having forearms, but that's it. Like, and you're taking on the X. No, I'm sorry, no. So
Yeah, it ain't gonna work. All right, Finch, your number two worst villain, my man.
well, we kind of already talked about him, but Mojo. So,
Mo,
and
Mojo.
I have annoying, and then I just have like one time when he made baby X-Men villains who destroyed Mojo World, and
Oh yeah,
he made
yeah, yeah.
baby Apocalypse, baby Holocaust, baby Dark Beast, and baby Sugar Man, and it basically backfired his plan, and they destroyed Mojo World. So yeah, he kind of sucks. So, but everything we said, he has potential. I could see him, returning to the series if they do X-Men 97. I mean, maybe if they did like a little like short series or like mini series movie type of thing, like how Marvel does their spotlights or like a special presentation, give us like a little cool Mojo World thing. It would be cool if like James Gunn did something, it's like where it's like Mojo just takes over our TVs and he's like, "Oh, this is, something like that." But
Yeah.
as a main villain, I don't see him. Yeah.
There is totally potential. There really is. Tyler, is there anything more you want to say about Mojo?
No, I keep thinking about like an episode being called Mojo Rising, and I laugh because that was a coffee shop that used to be right around the corner from me. So I just keep laughing about Mojo Rising. Yeah, yeah.
So, but we're all agreeing that Mojo has potential. He just hasn't reached it
I just think
because he's too
you
fat to reach.
you get a good writer in there can make him into a good character, but as he is, I just say no. But it's my opinion.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's what we're here for. All right, Tyler, you're number 2, my man.
See, I want to say my number one is my number two just to say it before you guys do, but I gotta stick with. I'm just gonna go forearms because just get it over with so I can get to Brian, then we can get to my worst villain. Because no, even if you guys say it before I do, he's still I think the worst villain. So, and
All
not
right.
worst isn't like awesome, like worst isn't dang that sucks, but yeah.
Well, Finch says, there's some uses for forearms, but,
I mean, yeah. Like, I mean, I'm gonna say like there's been times I've been at work or like dealing with my kids and like wish I had an extra arm or two, you know. But that would be great. But that's not villainy. That's not a great
Yeah.
villain power.
I mean, you can hold a lot of bags if you rob a bank, you know?
I mean, yeah.
well, I mean, I guess with forearms you can, kind of slap the X-Men, you know. You at
As
least
you're getting
slap 4
blasted by
people.
Cyclops from 50 feet away, you know. You're
I love it. All right. So, all right. My number 2 worst villain is I Scream.
Dang.
I
damn it.
Scream.
That's my number one.
That's my number one
Ah.
also.
So we all did research for sure. So I'm sorry, guys.
No,
But
it's okay.
my number 2, Ice Cream. He is a mutant that can turn himself into any flavor of ice cream. Yep, you heard that right. He can turn himself into any flavor of ice cream. He only has one appearance in 1983 and Obnoxio the Clown. And basically, he wanted to destroy the X Men because they had cool powers. So he sneaks into the X Mansion and at a Kitty Pryde birthday, and he becomes ice cream. And basically, they just lower the temperature in the room, make him cold, and he sneaks away as a hot fudge sundae or something. Absolutely worthless. He's freaking ice cream, for gosh sakes.
Yeah. So Brian, you might as well just go ahead and give us your number one since me and Finch had ice cream there.
So, ice cream was your number 2, guys?
No, my number one.
He
So
was your number 1?
He's on
yeah.
my number one. I have this weird thing where I had him up in X-Men column 2 because I wasn't sure if because in my research it says he joined Bishop's response team in Krakoa and helped the people of Milford to give kids free ice cream. So I don't know
Oh,
if
they brought him back?
I guess, yeah, I guess I don't know if he becomes a good guy later, but so I don't know.
Well, current X-Men comics is a little weird because, like, they got this special council in Krakoa that has Apocalypse on it, Sinister's on it, like heroes and villains together. So it's kind of weird. So I don't know. So yeah, Finch, who's your number 1?
It was ice cream. But if I
Oh,
had to
my
go with
apologies.
another one, I pick with the Untouchable. He's he just yeah, I don't. He's pretty forgettable.
Lame.
So
Lame.
yeah.
Lame.
Lame. Wasn't he like? Yeah, he was one of the original Brotherhood of Mutants guys, wasn't he?
I mean, they said he like he was a bit of a threat at the beginning, but then he like lost his powers. The Beast like basically made him he lost his own powers by doing like he couldn't control them. Beast did something and like he lost his powers, but he got him back and yeah, I don't know. So
What a pathetic loser.
loser.
Loser. All right, Tyler, what's your number 1, bro?
That's what I said. It was ice cream. That's why I said just go ahead and do yours.
Oh, dude, I'm so
Yeah, you saved
sorry.
us a lot of time. I think there's going to be some overlaps on a couple of these.
Yeah,
Probably.
that's why I said Brian, just go ahead and do your number one because you took all of our number one.
I'm sorry.
No, it's no problem. I'm just saying we all had similar brain waves here.
I know.
But you know,
All right. So, all right. My number 1, the Shi'ar Empire.
ooh,
I I freaking hate the Shi'ar Empire. I think they're so boring. I think they're stupid. Lilandra, whatever, Deathbird. They're boring as F. Lilandra is toxic to Xavier. She wants him to basically stay up there and be her big bird. and not care about humans and humanity and his people. Every story with them is very, very boring. I think they totally suck. I think they're the worst X-Men villain.
You know what? I didn't think about them because of like Lalandra and Xavier kind of being together sometimes. I thought that like I kind of was going more ally in my head, but I've never liked them at all, period. Just because I don't like when the X-Men go out into space and do all that stuff. But yeah,
Yeah, I hate when they're in space too. Like, it's just I don't know. I don't mind time travel until it gets overly ridiculous, but the space stories they always suck.
I mean, one thing about me with X-Men is I always liked the groundedness because I always liked more of the political overtones of the X-Men and what that can really shape. So I was never a fan of the space stuff. But that's a good number one, Brian. It's
Thanks,
no
guys.
it's
Thanks,
no
guys.
ice cream, but
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's a
I was
I
hoping for,
wouldn't have put a whole empire or species as a yeah, that's a good one.
then the Leandra. There you go. If I have to have one person, but yeah, I'm throwing them all in there. So okay. Any other thoughts, Finch, on the Shi'ar Empire?
No, they do kind of suck at times.
They do suck.
They were kind of cool in the X-Men 97, but you know.
No, she's toxic.
Well, her sister, I like her whole back and forth with Xavier, her sister. How
Mhm.
they were, she was like, "Get him back to his ghetto." Like, yeah, so but yeah.
All right. Villain round 2. This is the best. So the best of the villains.
the best of the best of the best, sir.
With honors. All right, Finch. Your number 3 best villain.
I'm going to say Strife. He's a Cable clone created by Apocalypse. He was debuted in New Mutants in 1987. He's got telepathy, telekinesis. He's got all of Cable's powers, but he's stronger than Cable because he doesn't need to use his powers to control the techno organic virus because he doesn't have it. So, and he's wreaked a bunch of havoc throughout the ages, because he travels and stuff through time. So, Strife.
Hmm. Tyler, what do you think, man?
I think that sometimes when you're creating a villain, by having it some form of a hero can make it really powerful or it cannot work. And from the little bit that I've known of Strife, I thought it worked quite well. And kind of gives Apocalypse, it's like, in my like all my X-Men stuff started with the cartoon and then kind of went into comics. So my point of origin for Apocalypse was him versus Cable. So the fact that Apocalypse creates a clone of his adversary and twists that to being his own personal thing, it's pretty darn dark, and I think it works.
What's funny about Strife is like a lot of people rank Strife as one of the worst X-Men villains. Like they put him as like one of the worst
Why?
because
Mm.
well,
Well, you know what? Well, obviously they haven't listened to us talk yet, so
yeah, yeah, for real, absolutely. A lot of people say like, well, Strife is like the epitome of what the '90s were in terms of Marvel comics, like clone, 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 clone. I don't
Yeah,
know.
all the pouches and no feet. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Strife just basically, he represents what Cable would be if it wasn't for Gene and Scott, like going to the future, raise him for a bit.
true.
He's that dark side, and that always can be interesting if it's done right. If it's written right. So nice Strife. Okay, all right, Tyler, your number 3 best villain.
I had to think on this one, and I had the initial thought, and I had to do some comic research to back myself up. But I put William Stryker because the idea that the X-Men are fighting for human mutant peace, and he really is a villain that's a human that just, tortures mutants, goes after mutants, and had an impact in just the legacy of the X-Men in a sense. And, it's one thing to look at the villainy and be like mutant versus mutant, but the great villains have their own point of view, who think that they are the heroes of their own story. And I think Stryker fits that very well. So yeah, I think he represents like the corruption of humans, the worst of the humanity, the corruption of government, and just shows like he is the epitome of the dark side of what humanity is as the X-Men fight to be part of humanity. So I went with Stryker.
I really like that answer. I really do. Like Stryker is really up there. And I mean X-Men 2 was so good. And you know, the best Stryker story or one of the best X-Men stories is God loves, man kills. And in the comics, I think we forget this because X2 made him military, but in the comics, he's a preacher. So
See, I saw that, and then I was looking through more like how eventually he did get military in the comics, and then of course we know him more from the film series.
yeah,
So, but even as a preacher, still represents a corruption of something that of a figurehead that should represent acceptance and represent growth, and really have the mindset that spiritually you could say we're all God's children still, even through things that have happened. But even then, he represents the dark side of religion.
yes. But to William Stryker, mutants, no, you go to hell. Finch, what do you think of Stryker, bro?
I really like that answer. Stryker, he's a great villain. And more than just his connection to Wolverine and things like that. And yeah, he's a good one.
I
Sorry.
totally agree.
Yeah.
No, I totally agree. All right, my number 3 best villain. My honorable mention, because this was tough for me to make the top 3. I had to really think on this. But my honorable mention is Juggernaut. I really love Juggernaut. I think he's a badass. I don't think he's been done completely to his potential in movies for sure.
Mm-mm.
Um,
No, I
and
think no, because in the movies we've never got like his origin to really dive into the character to build up who he is. We
right,
always just get dropped in with him already existing.
right, and like even though Ryan Reynolds did a good job as Juggernaut in Deadpool 2, he was more comedic than like this unstoppable force. I want him to come back. I wouldn't mind if Ryan does it. I'd like to come back in the red and just be a little bit more serious. But he's not my number 3. He's just my honorable mention. But my true number 3 is the Sentinels, and like basically
It's a
Bulwark,
good choice.
Trask, just the whole Sentinels in general. I really like I really like robots hunting the X-Men, humans freaking out, panicking. X-Men 97 did it so well. The first season of X-Men 92 did it so well. Days of Future Past did it well. I mean, you can throw Nimrod in this. You can throw anything. Just the concept of the Sentinels hunting X-Men, I love. I think it's just focusing on the panic of humans. I think Sentinels are just great villains.
I thought about them as well because then I was like, well, would I put Trask or would I go with just the robots? But I agree with you. Like the Sentinels, they represent. It's almost like I don't like something, but I'm not going to take care of it. I'm going to create something to do it for me. So it's like I have my hands clean of the carnage or
Exactly.
whatever happens or the
Yeah.
collateral damage. So it's like Trask, like, well, I created the weapon. It's like how people say, it's not the gun's fault that something happens, it's the person using it. Same concept. Like Trask is like, well, the Sentinel did it. I just made the weapon. It acted on its own. It's like the reverse of that, paradigm of thought. Because I mean, come on, Night of the Sentinel was, the best. It was the pilot episode of the cartoon, so like that's my first exposure to them,
Yeah.
and it was great. So I'm good job.
Thanks, man.
No, that's a good one, especially because throughout the stories, the Sentinels evolve just like the mutants, kind of, and
Yes.
they get better, they get more deadly. No matter how many they take out, there's always more coming. They're just an ongoing threat. So that's a good one.
And how they what they did with Bastion and X-Men 97 and these like humans that don't know they're Sentinels. Oh man, it was just so good. And it just upped the threat. So it's Sentinels. Finch, number 2 best villain, my man.
I went with Apocalypse. I don't
Ooh,
have many reasons. It's just Apocalypse is badass. Like Tyler mentioned, my first intro to X Men was the animated series, and Apocalypse, when he showed up, he was just menacing, the giant A on his chest, showing. And I remember my cousin had the action figure of him. He was like hulking over like all the other figures. He was a little bit bigger. The fact that he grows, he's like the first. I is he the first mutant? Because people say Namor is the first mutant,
He's the
but
first, and
but yeah,
Sabanur is the first.
yeah. And then when he turns people into the Four Horsemen, he's converted some of the best X-Men, Wolverine, Gambit, other people. If it wasn't for him, we wouldn't have Archangel. You know what I mean? Things like that. So, and then yeah, so Apocalypse is my number 2.
Tyler, what do you think on Apocalypse, bro?
I'm not going to disagree. I wrestle with Apocalypse as a villain in the sense of in the animated series when they're setting up the X-Men, Rogue asks Beast, what makes us like we are? And he's like, gamma rays, radiation, progress, television. And I always kind of understood that and took it as we started to make the mutants as we experimented with nuclear technologies. We started getting into radiation as we started synthesizing food and started gene manipulations and stuff like that, that we created, mutations in people. But then when you go to Apocalypse being the first mutant set in Egypt, it kind of changes that and makes that more of like a scientific natural selection and evolutionary tale. So I've always kind of had this balance with where I really like Apocalypse. In the future with his full on armor and making the Four Horsemen is cool. Because he's a mutant, but he's more than just a mutant. So like I said, I have this wrestle with how I feel about him, but he's definitely a great adversary.
I I would put Apocalypse within the top 5 for sure. Absolutely. I think that I think that probably my issue with Apocalypse is they don't really know how to handle him in live action and do it right. Oscar Isaac wasn't really handled well. Yeah, I think there's huge potential for Apocalypse, but I worry that they will make him a throwaway villain again instead of an overarching villain in the MCU. Let's just hope not. But I think Apocalypse, just the fact that he's like, you have to be strong enough. The survival of the fitness, yeah, whatever, the fittest, if you will. Apocalypse is great. He really is. All right, Tyler, you're number 2, bro. I'm interested. I'm intrigued.
My number 2 is my favorite X-Men villain, and that's Mr. Sinister. I think Mr. Sinister represents one, the idea of a human who's so obsessed and in love with mutation wants to be one, but he can't. He wants to give himself everything. He wants to, represent creating his own mutation through the collection of other mutants' mutations, the warped idea of science, a human who went a different way. But then you add in the factor of the obsession with the Summers Gray line and those characters. And then by being obsessed with those, what he does to them, the torture that he puts them through by, the Cable stuff, the stuff with Madeline Pryor, and just, ripping that family apart. And, of course, in the cartoon, he got into torturing Morph. And I just think Mr. Sinister is like really this dark, and I hate that we've never got him live. We got Essex teased in a couple of films, but we never got him in live action. I think he's a really haunting and scary, and he represents this perversion of humanity's obsession with mutation. So
I love Sinister. I can neither confirm nor deny if he's on my list. I think I one of the greatest crimes is that we haven't got Sinister in live action. Totally with you. I think
I totally wanted John Hamm to be Mr. Sinister. Like, I know
yes.
there was a talk of that at one point, but like I would have loved to have had John Hamm as Mr. Sinister.
That would have been it. That would have been a good choice.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
yeah, all those teases we got kind of sucked that we didn't get him already. Sinister's a great choice.
Absolutely. Any other thoughts, Finch?
No, I mean, I was hoping that, possibly Giancarlo Esposito could be him, but we've heard he's going to be in the Captain America 4, so I don't know.
Oh,
Yeah.
I didn't even think about him as Sinister. Oh my gosh, he would do good. Oh, yeah. Oh, oh yeah. Yeah, Finch. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah, my number two is a villain that you guys are probably familiar with because we're talking about him right now is Mr. Sinister. My number
Nice.
two.
Nice.
Um,
Nice.
I love Sinister is like pretty much like a Marvel Palpatine.
Mm.
I that's
Oh,
why I love Sinister. Most people don't know, or maybe people forgot, but when Cyclops can't control his optic blast because he was on a helicopter with his family and he jumped out of the helicopter, the helicopter crashed, he hit his head, and because he hit his head, that's why he can't control his blast. So the doctor that took care of him was Sinister. Every point in Scott's life, like teachers, mentors, doctors, whatever, was always Sinister in disguise. And his obsession with Cyclops and Jean, I think is an amazing villain.
I was gonna
So
say stalker much,
yeah.
yeah, I know, right? But I
It's
kind of think
personal. It's personal. Like, it's really, and I think that's what gets to being a great villain is how you relate to your hero. So
here we go. Finch, who is the best X-Men villain?
we're all going to say the same thing, right?
No, we're not. I know we're not.
I don't
Oh,
think I feel like Brian's gonna throw a curveball there, but I'm gonna go with the safe answer, Magneto. Need I say more? That's what I wrote. Magneto. Need I say more? So
I love it. Tyler,
Magneto. And
that's your
Magneto's the,
number one?
yeah, because Magneto walks the line of being a hero and a villain, and you can put him in either category, but he has such a strong point of view that you can't deny his feelings and where he comes from. You understand him. You might not agree with how he does his things, but I mean, he's always on that more villainous side for most things. I mean, like I said, he can kind of walk back and forth, but yeah, I think Magneto is one of the greatest comic book villains of all time.
Very, very good answer, boys. My number one is very controversial. You guys probably won't agree with me, but just hear me out. Hear me out. My number one best villain of the X Men is Professor Charles Xavier.
Man, I knew. I like as you were like getting into it, and you're like, it's controversial. I was like, man, he's gonna go because you made a comment to me one time we were talking about recently with the show. I like it. I'm not gonna deny it because I have I like the idea of Xavier, but everything I've seen with Xavier and the way he's been done, I've never quite been on the same page with Xavier. I feel like sometimes he's a little. I guess my if I wanted to sum up Xavier portrayed in the most arrogant way would have been in in X-Men First Class. Just the way that McAvoy comes off as perfect, but that's the issue I think with Xavier is like he doesn't think through things enough. But Brian's got a good conversation piece. That's a debate we can get into, but
I wouldn't rebuttal it because he's a dick at times, man. So uh yeah.
he neglects, and I think X-Men 97 pointed out a lot. Like, one of my biggest things was they didn't kill him. Like, they had him back in the Shi'ar and that he wasn't coming back to Earth and everyone's suffering because of it. And he set these people on a path and then he abandoned them and he manipulates and uses people. I mean, in some ways, you could argue,
Yeah, that's
he,
what makes Magneto right half the time. It's he abandons people, he manipulates people. I mean, Magneto's always saying it, get out of my head, Charles, or things like that. Other things is, he abandoned them. He gives his, we could say his worst enemy, but his best friend at the same time. He gives him control of his school, leaves everything to him. When it's like you have a perfectly good pupil right there who has done nothing but, the prodigal son type of deal. You know what I mean? It's like he
well, we'll talk about it.
does nothing but, admires him, follows his lead, does everything that he tells him to do, and he basically, yeah, he's a dick.
I
I don't
never liked him in the cartoon. I
I
was
don't
just
think
heard him like, whining.
so. I haven't defended my answer totally yet, but I don't know if I have to really more.
We're just so excited. We're like, yeah, yeah.
But I was hoping to give good answers, guys. So I love it. It's just the thing with Xavier is every single one of these kids, he creates like I mean, these kids have abandonment issues. You know, they have low self esteem. Some of them, like their parents, just hate them, and they're like, "Get out of here." And Xavier has been able to manipulate those feelings in these kids and young adults to basically make them his soldiers. And you can't go to Xavier and say you're wrong in the way you think, because God forbid, because Xavier
Mhm.
always believes what he thinks is right. It's his way or the highway. Like, no, humans will be good. Everybody will accept us. Well, it's not happening, buddy. He manipulates the loyalty of Cyclops and his students, and his students can't even have real lives because they just feel this sense of loyalty to Xavier's mission and Xavier's view.
You know what he
Xavier,
reminds me of? If you look at literature, he's
Mhm.
kind of like Fagin. You think of like Oliver Twist and
Oh yeah,
everything.
dude.
Recently, like Jania and I were watching The Artful Dodger
Mhm.
on Hulu, and how Fagin tries to give that sense of belonging, understanding part of things, but yet it's always kind of it's his way, it's his idea, what is, and you can't really escape it.
Yep. And he's a control freak. He's toxic. He's garbage. I mean, for example, he traumatizes students like in X-Men #4, he convinces the team that he's lost his powers so he can give them a pop quiz, which almost results in their deaths. And then in X-Men #42, he's killed off because there's an explosion, and the team is left to mourn him for 2 years in the comics. And he just shows up, he doesn't apologize, and he's like, here's your next mission. Like he just and also, Xavier has erased his X-Men's memories to forget certain people and events. He says he hasn't, but in the comics, he's manipulated Jean Grey. He's held in powers because he thinks it's right. This is the whole podcast in itself, so I'm going to shelf it. So, all right, now we're on to the heroes, the worst heroes of the X-Men. I think this podcast is going to keep getting better and better. So Finch, who do you think is the #3 worst X-Men hero?
I'm gonna take one I know is probably on your list. Well, I'm assuming it's on your list, Brian. The X-Men Forget Me Not.
Oh,
So apparently he has the ability, it's imperceptibility and perceptibility. That's what it is. Incapable of being perceived or remembered by almost everyone when not in direct eye view or like direct view. His presence and existence disappear, as do the memories of him completely. So he's been on the team from like the beginning almost, but nobody remembers him. So forget me not.
forgive me not. Excellent answer, Tyler. What do
That
you think
sounds
about
like
forgive?
crap. That just sounds like something that sounds like something from like Mystery Men. Like I can be invisible only when you're not looking at me. Like power.
That's exactly what I wrote in my notes because he is on my list as #3. Well, actually, I put him
I'm
as number
invisible.
one.
Can you see me?
Where'd
Yes.
Finch go?
Forget Me Not was my #1, but I'm going to move my list around now. Yeah, I basically put in my notes. He's basically the Invisible Boy from Mystery Men, or the Silence from Doctor Who. If you ever watched Doctor Who, when people aren't looking at him, they forget about him. Like he's get out of here. But he wasn't my #1 because he's not going to be my #1 anymore. Go ahead.
Nice. All right. So my number 3. So when you posed this question, I started thinking of like the team. Like, man, who's not the greatest on the team? But then I was like, man, they're all good characters. And then I was like, okay, so I started digging, having to dig more. So the ones that I picked, I'm not super familiar with, but reading over their powers and what they do, I was like, what the H is this stuff? So my number 3 is Tattoo,
Oh,
because I was just like, that character sounds boring and that power sounds ridiculous. Like this is what you're presenting as X-Men. not just mutant characters that interact in the world, but like someone who's actually supposed to be part of the X-Men, a character that's feelings appear written on them, like tattoos. That is bizarre. And what is the purpose of this character? Like, I mean, that to me just sounds like the kind of character you create as a parody that you put, like we said, in Mystery Men, where you have humor with it, like feeling and just like hungry or, horny or constipated or something just appears on their face.
Or
Like,
damaged across their forehead.
damage, like the stuff that you could really make fun of and play with. I'm like, that sounds like a good character to be jokingly, not a character that's seriously in the X-Men. But yeah, I'm going with tattoo.
Now, in Elektra, the movie, there was a character that had like these tattoos that could do stuff. Is that not the same character?
No.
Oh,
No.
okay. Because that character was kind of cool in the movie.
See, that would make sense. Kind of like the way they did Double Down on Arrow, where he had like tattoos of like cards and he could rip them off and, throw them. But no, sadly. But yeah.
My number 3 was tattoo, but I'm going to throw in beak.
That's my that's my next one, dude.
Yeah, and I'm going to make my honorable mention be my number 1. But
he's like, I just want something to talk about.
yeah. Tattoo I thought was worthless. And I'm going to throw in beak because beak, he's just a dude that looks like a bird. Like he can't even fly. He can't even do anything. He's worthless. So there you go.
He can glide short distances.
Like a gargoyle.
Get the hell out of here, dude.
But that's on my list too. So
That's your number 2?
it was my number 1, but
Oh,
I'll rearrange some stuff. So
nice. All right.
Finch,
Okay.
number 2. That's basically
I
where
guess
we're
it's
at.
my turn.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah.
Good.
So honorable mentions. Now this is going to be controversial, but just because she kind of doesn't do anything a lot of the times is Jubilee. She's an honorable mention. So I like Jubilee. I like her, but as like a regular X-Men, she just sparkles.
I'm glad that we have honorable mentions to
She doesn't
take
really
us
do anything.
from the
No. So she's not my. So my number 1 is I actually kind of like this power and ability, but this is on my list. So I go with Maggot, and it's because he has these
Maggot was
two
on my list.
techno-organic worms that burst out of his body 2 times a day to feed. They're named Eenie and Meanie, and they can literally eat anything. They're like his digestive system. So they can literally eat anything, which is a cool ability, but is it going to be used all the time? Like, and it's kind of gross. And yeah, so Maggot is on my list.
Maggot was my number 2. And I will just say, like, he seems more like a Morlock character than a straight up like X-Men. So yeah, I was reading and I was like, I remember that name and I looked, I was like, that's just weird.
It sounds
Man,
like a little thing that you would see off of like Rick and Morty or something, like where they
it sounds
run
like,
away. It's like and it goes back in his body or something.
it feels like with those characters, you're now like scooping the bottom of the barrel just to see who can come up with the weirdest, dumbest character possible and make him an X-Man. So yeah, Maggot was my number 2.
We have so much similar thoughts here, like a very very similar, and I knew it would be. Okay, so did you guys? Okay, so did you guys give your number 2s? So all you have left is your 1s.
That was my 1.
That was your 1s.
We're
Okay, so
we're
Finch's
already on
list.
round 3.
So Finch's list is done. Okay, Tyler, you still have a number 1 worst one? You do. Okay. All right. So my number 2.
Yes, sorry, I was muted.
Oh, you're cool, dude. So number 2, worst X-Men. I think my 2 and my 1 now are going to be pretty controversial because you'll probably think my number 2 should be number 1. But anyway, my number 2 is Exceptional, or Bailey Hoskins. Bailey Hoskins is a kid that actually has a comic that actually is the worst X-Men ever. Bailey, or Exceptional, has the power to blow up himself and cause a mass explosion, but he can only use it once. And then he's done. so I don't know how he knows he can do this, since you kind of have to like test it. I have no idea. Maybe Xavier just like read in him and is like, "This is what you can do, kid." I don't know, but he eventually does get a story where he uses the power, and and it's kind of like really, yeah, I'm like, crying. But this kid's worthless. Like you're never gonna use your power. Go sit with Beak. So
I feel like they should just be on a team together. Like this is just a team in the making that needs to be put together. All these characters we have going on. So I guess it's my turn for my number one now. My number one, I was reading about this character, and I was like, seriously? But my number one is Skin. And just reading is like the description of his powers having approximately 6 feet of just extra skin that he's capable of stretching. And I'm just like, that's like saying that you look at Mr. Fantastic and these other, and like, we're gonna make it now sick and twisted and disgusting and make him like just this hideous kind of like, I'm just like that. Why? Like it's once again like this is a character like I guess his technical he appeared in Uncanny X-Men, but his team affiliation was Generation X. But I'm like, that just sounds like a disgusting power and characterization. Like, really, like
Is that really
skin.
like a mutation, or is that just an extra long skin tag? You know,
I mean, it's just like they were really reaching. It can be stretched and reshaped, and I'm like, I just think about even in the DC world, you have elongated man, plastic man, and
Metamorpho.
yeah, and you're like, okay, but they're not like extra skin, like they can move stuff, and it's like, okay, they just feel better than what this character looks. I don't know. It's just yeah. So
It's
skin.
like foreskin. You know,
Yeah, I'm about to say that would be the better character name. Foreskin. Like at least I'd be like, okay,
like
that's
more.
original.
Brian, you're muted. Can't hear you.
damn it, I was waiting to say a joke. I was waiting for him to pause because I had a joke. I was like, well, actually, Marvel has a new team coming out. It's Forearm and Skin. You know, Foreskin.
No, that would be a book that probably sell well. Foreskin.
Oh, it sure would.
Forearms gripping all that skin. Oh,
That just feels like a robot chicken skit that never happened for X-Men.
write it. Write it up. Write it up.
Oh my
Oh
gosh.
my gosh.
I could just think of something in my head. Oh man. Oh, ugh. Yeah, we gotta get out together. All right. Number one, worst hero. Hold on. I gotta move my stuff around. Sorry here. Okay, my number one worst hero, I think, is probably gonna be controversial, but just hear me out. Hear me out. Hear me out.
All right.
Um I have Thunderbird, the original Thunderbird. So Thunderbird was debuted in Giant X-Men #1 with Nightcrawler, Colossus, Storm, all these heavy hitters, awesome team. But Thunderbird was basically a Native American character that had like super stamina, basically like the Captain America of Native Americans, super strength, whatever, all this crap. But on his second mission with the team, I think it might have been in that very comic, but in the second mission, Thunderbird decides to pursue an ascending escape jet so he can take it out on his own. And he does this despite the team urging him not to, because it wasn't needed. But there's no stopping Thunderbird. He jumps to the craft and he punches the helicopter or the jet until it explodes, and then it kills him. He jumps, he just does it. He's basically he's basically like Mongol in the Suicide Squad. He just jumps on this jumps on this flying thing and just starts pounding it. I'll save you guys, and he just dies.
Does he
I
wear a cape?
No, he
Sorry, I
does
just
not.
think of a jet and die-in and a cape. You know, no more
But he needs
capes.
to. I rank him as horrible because like this is giant size X-Men, for God's sakes. Like this is the comic that started Claremont's run. And Claremont didn't write this though. But I mean, you got Wolverine join the team, Storm, Nightcrawler, Colossus, and then you got this one guy that you're just gonna waste. Like you could have
You need somebody to get killed off.
I know, but like
This was the diversity issue where they introduced all the diversity.
yep.
Um, yeah,
And then you just say F you to the Native American cultures. Like, yeah. It's just yeah.
typical
It's stupid.
Americans.
Typical Americans, absolutely. All right, boys. So there we go. Now we're getting some more fun here. So heroes, the best X-Men heroes, the best of the best of the best.
sir.
Finch, who's your number 3 best hero?
All right, let me start by saying I took this in a sense of these are not my favorites. Okay,
Okay,
like
that's fair.
I'll list my favorites real quick: Bishop, Gambit, Nightcrawler, Wolverine. Boom, top 4 right there for me. X-Men, right? These are just ones that I think who have like are the most impactful on the teams, right? And I'll start at number 3. We're gonna go with the literal goddess herself, Storm, Omega level mutant. Her powers have still not been pushed to their limits yet. She's been literally worshipped as a goddess. Just Storm. We had a discussion about Storm previously. She's just so badass, and a woman of color leading the X-Men at times. She's great.
Freaking A, she is.
I was just nodding my head.
Tyler, your thoughts on Storm, sir?
I'll hold my thoughts on Storm.
Okay. I will not. I think Storm is, in my opinion, the best female hero in Marvel. I think that when she goes in the MCU, they need to go all in on this girl. When they acquired the X-Men, I was so excited for Black Panther being there and the possibility of Storm and Black Panther in the MCU as like this power couple. I I don't think that we've had a definitive live action Storm. Haley Berry did good. The girl that played Storm in Apocalypse, she she didn't like. She was okay, but I don't think we've seen the definitive of what Storm's potential could be. So yeah, I totally support that. Tyler, you're number 3 best hero, sir.
So this category is the first time I get to say honorable mentions because this is the one I wrestled with the most.
Yeah, for real.
So my honorable mention is wait for it. Wait for it. If anyone gets that reference, I love you. Gambit. Gambit's my honorable mention
Yeah.
because he really does represent the kind of villain, rogue, heart of gold person who is trying to escape their past and overcome things and is self-sacrificing, a hero to the end, even though he always kind of portrayed himself as the scoundrel recluse that doesn't need anybody, but he really shows who he really is. So that's my honorable mention. My number 3 is probably Brian's number 1, but he's probably going to throw us a curveball. It's going to probably be Brian's number 2 is Nightcrawler. I love Nightcrawler because I love the heart of the character. I love, one thing that I kind of joked about in my mind one time, I was thinking how much I didn't like secondary mutations, like in the Kitty Pryde story, where it led into Days of Future Past. But then I thought, well, crap, Nightcrawler has double mutation. And I was like, well, I'll just let it go then because of the teleportation and the physical changes. But with his physical mutation, the fact that he overcomes so much hate just for his physical look and still is such a beautifully good person is the best example of what anyone should be. And I think Kurt Nightcrawler is an example to everyone he meets of being peaceful, loving, compassionate, and good for all humans and mutants alike. So Nightcrawler is my number 3.
That's a great one. Nightcrawler, as I listed, is one of my favorite mutants of all time. X-Men mutant. He has inspired me so much that, the age-old question, if you could have any superpower, what would you have? And I always answer teleportation, the way Nightcrawler does it. Because there could be other
Yeah.
ways where it's like you teleport and you're naked or something. But the way Nightcrawler does it, where he has to look at something or imagine it and he can poof, he's there, And he could be up in the air when he's doing it. So it's better than flying, it's better than invisibility. So Nightcrawler is great.
I will hold my thoughts on Nightcrawler because I'm getting emotional right now. And I'm wearing a Nightcrawler shirt. I just bought one finally, found one that says BAMF with Nightcrawler in the middle of it. I'm getting emotional. I'll hold off my thoughts on Nightcrawler. Because, yes, Tyler, you're so right. You boys are so right. Okay, so my number 3, my honorable mentions, and they are extreme honorable mentions. Where we're so good on time on this podcast, we're doing better than I thought we would. that we might get in a whole discussion separate of who really are the best X-Men, not necessarily our favorites, because I like where Finch is going here, but who represent what X-Men should be completely. So honorable mentions: Storm, absolutely; Gambit, totally; and Colossus, because Colossus I feel does not get a lot of respect. He's often like forgotten, and he hasn't been used very well, and it makes me sad.
What
The
about in
fact that
Deadpool?
and
They
D-
do
I'll
pretty
also
good on Deadpool.
yeah, and Deadpool he's used very well, especially when he gives a speech, for five things. But the fact that he hasn't really been on the animated series, even though he's going to be coming, and X Men '97 too, I assume, it just blows my mind. But my number three, number real answer is Iceman. Mr. Bobby Drake is number three. I think the version I love of Iceman the most is probably Ultimate X-Men's Iceman, where he has a bandana and he's just like smile, he's just happy to be there. But one of the key moments of Iceman and Ultimate X-Men, and just a key factor of Iceman period, is that Bobby is so unsure of himself, and he's so unsure of his abilities and what he can do. Let's not forget, Iceman's an Omega level mutant, and Iceman is, his family didn't accept him of being a mutant, and they didn't accept him being gay, but Bobby and Ultimate X-Men, Bobby has this moment where the whole team's in trouble and his powers unleash, and he freezes a whole sentinel top to bottom and becomes ice. And I think just Bobby is the epitome of like just doubting yourself and letting your anxiety and fears of what you can become. He's that in an ice shell, and I just love Iceman. I love his powers, and I just love the focus on thinking about what you can become and what you can be, and stop doubting yourself. So I love Iceman. There you go. Finch, what do you think?
I think I'm surprised that it's your number three. So
Mm.
I know how much you like Iceman. So
I love Iceman.
I'm a little surprised there. Yeah, no, that's a great choice. He's Omega, and yeah, he's important. He's an original OG, and we need more Iceman.
Hey Tyler, what do you think about Iceman?
I think Iceman's great. I think, like Finn said, he's an original X-Men. I think, when you look at how he was portrayed in the cartoon, originally he was like in one episode, and it was like,
Just one episode.
and it was very like, "Meh."
Yeah,
And then in the films, he wasn't bad, but I don't think he got to really shine. I mean, gosh, it was the third movie he went full ice for like 3 seconds.
I lost my
You know,
crap in
you
that
and my
theater.
brother
In that
both.
in that theater when he went full ice against Pyro, lost my freaking mind.
You and my brother both, man. My brother loved Iceman,
They gave him a little bit
and
of shine in Days of Future Past before,
Yes, they do.
you know.
I just feel like he was a character that has never really got his day, because I feel like his power of ice is great when you think about when it was created, but it's one of those powers that's so fundamental that people have ripped it off and used it in other things. We've seen that we haven't got to explore the character of Bobby as much, though I think we've gotten a good representation in the films. It is one I think is a very underrated X-Man when it comes to just talking about X-Men in general. So
My intro to Iceman was actually Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends.
That
You
was
know,
mine as
where
well.
he's sliding around everywhere.
yep.
Yep. He does the full body,
Yeah,
breaking out of the shell. Freaking awesome.
yeah.
Okay, Finch, number two, best hero.
All right. So again, like I said, these are the ones that I think are the best X-Men. This is gonna be maybe controversial. Maybe you guys don't agree. I went with Wolverine. I know he's overrated, but I have that he kept the X-Men
That will
relevant.
be a podcast in a couple weeks. Is
Uh,
Wolverine overrated? It's on the
well,
list.
he has kept the X-Men relevant in the pop culture zeitgeist. He's a badass. Even when his adamantium is ripped out of his body, he powers through it. Ends up with the bone claws, becomes Savage Wolverine. I remember the episode of the Savage World where they all go down there and everybody loses their abilities, and he has his claws, which is controversial. And you could break that apart and be like, wait a second, because if they're bone claws, then how, but whatever. He was still the only one that was able to, save the crew because he still had some abilities and powers. That healing factor, the fact that, like, he, I mean, yeah, the movies, I don't know. Wolverine though, without Wolverine on the team, the X-Men would not be the X-Men we know today. So
The
Wolverine.
only thing that I say about right now, I'll put a pin in it, is about Wolverine being overrated is because Hugh Jackman brought such a charm and love to the character that everyone became obsessed with Wolverine because of Hugh Jackman. And then that became the poster boy for everything X-Men. So that's all I'm going to say. I don't think it diminishes the character because we're talking about the character overall of what people have taken and done with that character. As far as mass culture, we can't control that.
I mean, he's a short guy with anger issues, so I relate to that a lot. And
Which is not Hugh Jackman. So
exactly, yeah. But that's why I love Wolverine. He's like, why? He's always angry, and he's short, and he's got claws, and he's buff, and yeah, I love Wolverine.
I I love Wolverine too. I do. Well, there's two sides of that. I love Wolverine because he's such a great leader. He's such an interesting character. He has so many great stories. It's argued that his villains can tend to be the best of the X-Men villains. He's he's written so well consistently. But the other side of that is when you throw Wolverine on the team, he becomes the focus, and then no one gets time to shine. So, but that's gonna be a point of a future podcast. Is Wolverine overrated? But I really do love Wolverine, and I can't tell you how many times in my life I put three knives in between my fingers and just like you know um
yeah.
yeah,
They make
Wolverine
the sound
Wolverine
shing.
Snake. Tyler, number two.
So my number 2 is Aurora Monroe. I think Storm represents just pure heroism. She also, like, you look at the character, Finch will start talking about her and everything, and that's why I was holding my thoughts, but she was worshipped as a goddess, but she still stayed humble. She still gave back, and she's a leader, and she believes in, I want to say Xavier's dream, but she's not a blind follower of Xavier. She believes that humans and mutants can coexist together, and there's a place for that. And she's just a very strong, heroic character, and her powers are amazing. I mean, they're so fundamental and elemental, and just all the things that she could do that we don't think about, like with just controlling and manipulating weather. Like in the X-Men 97 cartoon where she says, I can't feel the moisture in the air and everything, things that we don't even think, oh, she would be able to all the time. The wind, how that connects her. So I picked Aurora.
Excellent, excellent choice.
Anybody needs tissue? She can't feel the moisture. Oh my god. Oh, they got me. Oh, that hurts me. Okay. I love Storm. I really do. Like, I can't believe, I can't count how many times that Finch and I just said it in earlier episodes watching this with 97. You know, just that line that she says to Jean, like in the finale, where she's like, have them weather your mind. And then Jean's like, mind your weather or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It just,
And then even the Cyclops, show him the forecast. Ooh wee.
woo! When she's walking in the sand and the lightning strikes and makes glass. Oh my god, so awesome. And and then you get even better moments like, what happens to a toad when struck by lightning? The same
Same
thing that
thing
happens
that
to
happens
everything
to
else.
everything else.
Such good writing. Yeah, Storm is great. Storm is so great. My number
And
two is Kut Lagna.
I knew it because I know what your number 1 is. I know what your number 1 is.
We'll see. Um,
No, I know. I freaking know what it is. And if I'm wrong, I'll cry, but I know. But go ahead. Continue.
you probably do. Nightcrawler, man. Nightcrawler, I think, is the epitome of what an X-Men should be. The way that he uplifts his teammates, the way that he just keeps positive, the way that, I mean, he he's a man of faith. He just but he doesn't throw down people's throats. He's everything that I wanted to be in a minister. When I was younger, just loving people always, no matter what. And the things that he's gone through in his physical appearance, and just dealing with that, and then being abandoned by his mom Mystique and just thrown away, even though she's blue, Abadio and die. you know, and then him just wanting that connection with Rogue and that family, and just being with X-Men, and just believing in the best in everybody. I Kurt is what probably Xavier should be, but he's not. And just the way he teleports is freaking awesome. And Alan Cummings just blew Nightcrawler out of the water, and I wish we would have got more. I really
Yes, he
do.
did.
I love Nightcrawler. Yeah, yeah, he's my number two.
Yeah. I mean, I've talked about him, but yeah, I just, like Brian said, it's Nightcrawler to me would be an X-Men that could lash out and just be so angry all the time, but he doesn't. He is my favorite part of X-Men too. Like, to me, if he wasn't in that film, I wouldn't really like the film as much as I do. To me, he made that movie
Yeah,
because he represented such a different point of view of mutants and their place in the world compared to Storm, who we see the little arc between the first two films about how she feels and how she's afraid of humans because she has a mutant, but she can hide. She looks like everybody. Where Kurt, he lives with being a mutant in the open constantly.
I
Yeah, I love it.
and
I love
oh, good,
Nightcrawler, man.
good, good, Finch.
No, I love Nightcrawler, and the religious aspect. Growing up religious, and that's it resonates, man. And yeah,
I love it. Everybody buy the shirt. Bamp.
that's a cool looking shirt, man.
Thanks, dude.
It is.
And his live action debut in the beginning of X2 at the White House is one of the greatest introductions to a character, not just in superheroes but cinema, man. It was awesome. Just the teleporting and the smoke, and just thank you. It was awesome. All right, Finch, your numero uno best hero.
All right, man. I got no clever intro to this except this guy gives you main character energy vibes. He's the leader of the X-Men, Cyclops, Scott Summers, because he's, like I said, main character energy. If you think about it, the X-Men revolve around the Summers family tree. Many stories are in regards to the Summers and the relationships. You got Havoc, the brother, you got Crosshair, the father, Cable, the son, Rachel, the daughter, the wife, Jean or Madeline, his girlfriend Emma. It's I know there's more, but at one time I remember Brian mentioning that Cyclops he's the idea of Charles and Magneto, to where he doesn't,
Yes.
he's like right in the middle of them, and he's like the perfect student. He's a great leader, but we know that he has these tendencies to do anything to complete the mission at times. He'll go out and do what needs done by starting another team and allowing that team to, if need be, murder people and things like that. So yeah, my number one pick is the leader of the X-Men, Cyclops.
Hell yeah.
Well, I'm just going to jump in here because my number one is Cyclops. So to continue my conversation, I will say this: like you were saying, like what he represents is a completion of the ideology that's being taught to him. He believes in Xavier's mission, and he's willing to fight for it wholeheartedly, to the point that, in a way, in a tragedy, Cyclops is also a very tragic character, because as anything that X-Men 97 showed us, you go back and you watch that first episode, then you watch what happens. Everything is torn and ripped from him, and he has to make peace with it by the end. He believes that he's going to run the X-Men. He believes he's got control, and Xavier took all of that from him. And yet he's still there taking care of his team more so than Xavier. Cyclops, is fighting for that peace. And he even, above his own family, but he represents also just being a good person, a good leader. He was the first. In some stories, he is one of the OG X-Men. He's one of the first students. I think he was perfectly cast in the films, but then they didn't give him anything to do because of Hugh Jackman. One of my favorite lines is in the first X-Men film. It's when Xavier's in the medical center and Scott's sitting there talking to him. He says, "Don't worry about them. I'll take care of them." So like he's going to take care of the students. He'll step into the role that needs to be done and be the leader and be the role model to these kids. And that's why with X-Men 97, I was okay with Xavier being dead and seeing how that story went with Cyclops in that role and what the X-Men would look like being led completely by Cyclops and him upping into the world as the kind of the new Xavier and what that would look like for him as the leader going forward. But that was taken from him. And I think that Scott's a very strong character that puts up with a lot and's overcome a lot. And like going back to Mr. Sinister, that tie and how much, like you said, Finch, the X-Men revolve around the Summers family. So Cyclops is my number one.
Cyclops is one of the tippy tops for real. He's definitely up there, and I respect you guys' decisions. And
bring on that controversy that you're going to bring on, Brian. Let's do this.
The number one greatest X-Men of all time, period. No ifs, ands, or buts. And Brian's always right. And so is this guy, Mr. Magnus, Mr. Eric Lenscher, Mr.
I knew it. I knew
Magneto.
that's who you're going to pick. I knew that's who you're going to pick.
I had a suspicion.
I knew as soon as Nightcrawler was proven number 2, and after he picked Charles for being the villain, I was like, Magneto's going to be one of his heroes. And then as soon as he picked Nightcrawler's number 2, I'm like, oh, it's for sure Magneto.
It's all about perception.
It is all about
Charles is the villain, Magneto's the hero.
Absolutely. And I think they go back and way, but I think Magneto at the same time, like we said earlier, I think he goes about things the wrong way that paints him more villainous. But it's also the hero and the villain is all about who wins the war at the end. So he can go either way. And the whole Magneto was right. Well, kind of, but you can't. To me, it's always a message of not judging people or judging things on a large mass scale of like all people are this or all humans are this, especially when you're forcing them into the position where they make that judgment. And a lot of Magneto's actions built people to the judgments that they made against him in X-Men 97. But I think Magneto is a great character because we've talked about this a lot, and I'll save a lot of this for our discussions later on. But having the tie to the Holocaust is so important of understanding the character, what he's dealt with, where his perspective comes from, that we can see and agree with him. So,
Magneto is number one hero wise because Charles is willing, because Charles believes he's so right and that mutants and humans can coexist. Charles puts so many in the middle of that battle, and he just goes into it. But Magneto is like, let's look here. Okay, humans did the Holocaust and took their own people that aren't a threat and just threw them in camps and just said, "Hey, you're going to die because you're different." African Americans just getting shot, getting hosed, civil rights. You're going to drink in this other fountain. You're not going to sit on the same bus as us. Gay people. Hey, you can't get married. You can't do this. You can't do that. You're not a part of that. Magneto is right because humans can't accept things that are different.
But can mutants either? And that was the point of X-Men 97. Like humans and mutants aren't that different. Like they're the same, just there's a change. And that goes back to the point of, you're just the next step if you look at the evolutionary chain. But the mental state of a mutant isn't different than a human. Like they're the same thing, and there's evidence of the prejudice of mutant against mutant. I mean, the Morlocks represent a prejudice of mutant against mutant,
True.
and even when they try to be in harmony, the only reason they're in harmony is because they're forming a common enemy. But if the mutants were to overtake the humans and be the dominant species, sadly, nature would take its course, and mutants would be exactly the same way they are. And that's
Yeah.
kind of the point of X-Men
Yes,
97 with
that is
Bastion
true.
is
That is true.
they prove that this is an evolution and they're fighting against it. They would put Bastion and his kind, like what Bastion has become, like in the same box that they're being put in by the humans, proving that, it's a cycle that has to be overcome. You can't say all is good or all is bad and that, the humans did this. Well, yeah, well, will do the same and have done the same thing, because just because I'm born with the ability to shoot optic blasts out my eyes, I still think the same. I still experience the same. I'm not like this completely different entity. I mean, we have in real life, you have people who are born with mutations and they're still human. They're,
Groovy mutation. Groovy mutation.
groovy, so you look at the way people, like, you can equate things to like people with disabilities. They're different, but they're still humans. They're still part of our race. Like even someone who's born, and I say this with all love and compassion, is like people who are born with Down syndrome. They're still like, they're not separate from us. They're still part of us.
Yeah,
But
but
that
Yeah,
is
but
it.
I
people,
guess Magneto is right in a sense of people are not willing to accept that sometimes. Though you
they're not.
Some
look at the
people aren't.
comment
Some people
section
are.
on YouTube videos and stuff where somebody's doing something nice for a Down syndrome person, somebody just has to
Yeah,
make a evil, cruel joke or something like.
and that's because there is an innate ability to hate that we have to overcome. And that's the thing, is like, that's why I hate mass categorization, is because once you start labeling in the masses, you create anger, you create hate, you create discourse amongst people. And you can't blanket statement things. So when Magneto's like, oh, the humans did this, not every human did that. You have people like Moira, who's supposed to represent the good of humanity. But then you have people like Sinister, who's the darkness of humanity, who corrupts mutation for what it is.
But humans are bad. Okay, they're
Okay.
bad. I mean, being the deaf guy, if being the deaf guy, I can't always communicate like normal people, and people treat me different because of that. Like
Just
if
some
I
people suck, man.
and 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 like I don't have a I mean, I don't know if you call it a mutation, but like just trying to have conversations with people will think I'm stupid. Like when I worked, sales in person, and I asked people to repeat things or ask them to speak up, and they would just be like, "You retarded or something?" People just don't like the extra effort it goes to treat people with respect if they're different and they're not on that level, and that's where Magneto's the best because
To
because
quote my girl Storm, people fear what they don't understand. That was one of those
absolutely.
lines that was spoken in the cartoon that hit me as a child, that stayed with me. To quote another great legend, be curious. And the problem was they just weren't curious, man.
Hmm.
Don't be judgmental. Be curious, or be curious. Don't not judgmental.
Be
Um,
curious, not judgmental.
absolutely. And also, why Magneto is great. He defeated Apocalypse in Age of Apocalypse all by himself. And even though he erased that timeline when he did it, he defeated the Avengers by himself. He's defeating the X-Men by himself. All you need is Magneto. Magneto is the best.
Was that a Beatles song? All you need is
All you
Magneto.
need is Magneto. Magneto.
All you
Magneto.
need is Magneto.
And if you want to go with my how I characterize Scott as being main character, you could say Magneto's main character energy too, man. I
Yeah.
mean, look at his family tree.
For real,
He's
man.
he's got Quicksilver, Scarlet Witch, Polaris. He's his storylines have carried on.
Freaking awesome.
So
I mean, you look at just the depth of the character in itself, like you could do a whole, comic series on just him as your main protagonist. You don't have to need all the side characters. I mean, something that you said earlier, Brian, you were hinting at is Magneto is a leader who gets involved. Charles is very much a leader who puts other people involved.
Yep.
He sits back, he sends out
Magneto
his
gets crap
troops,
done.
and Magneto leads being on the line. That's why I think Magneto's a good foil for Scott in a lot of ways
Yeah, two sides
because
of a coin.
yeah, and the thing that Scott is kind of the child of Xavier and Magneto is a great analogy and a great way of presenting that character.
It's like that one line in X-Men 97 when Magneto first shows up to do good, and he's like, "Why didn't Charles use his money and wealth to help these people?" Yeah.
Exactly, because he's a villain. So real quick,
So it's now Magneto's men. What? M men? M men? M
that's
M.
hey man, do you see how that evening gown he wore? Like the guy's ready. Like, he's ready to be the face and be beautiful. You know, Magneto pride. What the heck am I saying? I don't even know anymore. All right. So Finch gave us like what he felt was the three best X Men. And Finch, I'm curious, what are your three favorite X Men?
I believe I mentioned it at the top, but I guess if we're
I'm
going to
so
top
sorry.
three, it'd be Bishop, Gambit, and Nightcrawler.
Awesome
And
choices.
Bishop because when I was, African American, badass, buff
You
guy
were African American. You're not anymore.
in the in the in the 90s, representation mattered, and
Hell yeah, man.
this guy coming from the future being badass.
With a
Gambit
dope haircut.
because yeah, well at the time he had the long hair, so yeah.
Exactly.
Um, Gambit because he's just his badass energy, and then Nightcrawler because, like I mentioned, if I could have any power, it'd be Nightcrawler, and we haven't seen a bad iteration of Nightcrawler yet, live action or animation. Like
It's true.
go to X-Men 97 or go to X-Men 97, go to X-Men 92, go to what's the one with the teenagers, X-Men Evolution,
Evolution.
Evolution.
or Wolverine and the X-Men. Like never
Wolverine the
bad.
X Men, I really loved how like he stayed on that boat and was just protecting people. Like
Yeah,
that's my boy. I love him.
yeah.
Tyler, who who are your top three? Like who do you think are the top three best X Men? Was your list a favorite or who you really thought was like the
Well,
best of the best?
they're my favorite because of their best, because of the
That's fair.
characterizations of who they are. So like they lined up like that's why I said my honorable mention is Gambit because I think I like Gambit as a character. I like Wolverine as a character, but he's not my favorite. It's because what draws me to the characters being my favorite is because of the characteristics they offer and have with what Finch was describing. So I think Storm, Cyclops, and Nightcrawler represent the best of what an X-Man should be and can be. They've all overcome obstacles as every X-Men character has in their own personal lives, but just the people that they are in general, even if they weren't part of the team, I think really represents that. Cyclops is difficult because he was very much there from the beginning and grew up into it. That's why I feel like he represents the best of what the X-Men have to offer.
So I gave pretty much like who I think are like the favorite kind of, but also a little bit of the best. But if I were to say what the top three best X Men are, like pure X Men, so that Magneto wouldn't count on this list because villainy, I'm gonna have to say top three: Storm, Cyclops, and Nightcrawler. Like
Yeah.
Nightcrawler being like the epitome of what I feel. I think Cyclops is extremely underrated, and I feel that he should have been the focus where they gave the focus to Wolverine. And
Wolverine's is an easy character
he
to
yeah, he is.
introduce into the story. But when you go back and you also think about they're making that first X-Men film on a lower budget, he has a very easy power to show on screen that doesn't involve as much special effects.
Absolutely right.
Uh,
Yeah.
you know, and because he was so popular, they were like, "Well, just keep pushing him to the front." I think not Ty Olson, Ty Sheridan, is that what it is?
Sheridan, Ty Sheridan.
Yeah, yeah. I think he did good as Cyclops later on, but he wasn't like definitive. He wasn't that's Cyclops, that's Scott. The guy who did it for the short period of time in X Men Origins Wolverine, I thought he did all right. I think James Marsden was perfect for Cyclops. They just didn't give him the story and the script to work off of. So
Well, to piggyback on what you said and build onto it, guys, this was a great episode. Like we had some really good discussion and real fun here. Next week we're gonna have an episode I've definitely been waiting for, other than this one. What would your MCU X-Men team be, and who would play them? So basically, you're in charge of the MCU X-Men. Who is going to be in your movie, and who's going to play who?
How many members is the team? 5?
I mean, you don't want to go too crazy and have like 12 or like whatever.
I'd say 5 to 7's a good.
5 to 7. 5 to 7.
Odd numbers always work best on teams.
Totally agree.
Uh,
Because then you get
um,
that epic shot of the leader in the middle and then equal numbers.
Yep.
I'm OCD, so I like the symmetry. But I think 5 to 7. 5 to 7. Your villain, whoever. I'm
And
just
de facto Charles Xavier.
yeah. You gotta have Charles.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
You
no,
don't
Charles is getting murdered in my opening scene.
really.
Nice. Nice.
Oh, I got to hear this. But I'm curious if you guys are going to have Wolverine on your team. I'm curious if you're going to have new school or old school. I'm really curious, and I think that's going to be a really, really fun episode. I'm really looking forward to that
Yeah,
one.
I am too.
So thank you guys and listeners for joining us. I was very excited for this podcast, obviously, and I know it's going to spring lots of conversation. So you can find this episode and our X-Men episodes on YouTube, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and online at briantheguys.alitu.com. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok at Brian the Guys. And relaunching in August is my flagship podcast, Gravely Amusing, which is a horror, sci-fi, and all things paranormal podcast, where me and my cousin Steve are discussing the birth of sci-fi and pop culture, cryptids, ghost stories, unsolved mysteries, monsters, and aliens. And speaking of aliens, join us on July 8th for our first episode back as we discuss the Roswell conspiracy. You can find Gravely Amusing on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, X, Instagram, TikTok, all at Gravely Amusing. And you can listen on our website at gravely.amusing.alitu.com. Finch, thank you so much for being a part of this as always.
Hey, thanks for having me, man.
Thanks, dude. You always have great answers. Great debate. And Tyler, always a pleasure working with you, sir. Can you tell us about your podcast and all the stuff you're working on and where they can find you, man?
I appreciate that. It is nice. Like, yes, I am a Superman fan and I'm a big DC fan, and I have the Krypton Report where all podcasts are available. But I do like to talk Marvel. It is nice. Like, the X-Men and the Marvel animated series was a big part of my childhood that I was exposed to. So it really, helped shape a lot of things. So it is nice to get back to those roots and talk about that. But you can also find me personally on YouTube and everything, and check that out on X. But look for Krypton Report Pod and you'll find me there.
All right, man. We like to find you, man. You have a lot of projects working on. So we definitely want to check out Tyler at Krypton Report and all the things that he's got going on there. Thank you, my Brymen. Thank you, listeners. And for when you need comic knowledge, don't cry. Just listen to Brian the Guys.